Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the Wolff Den presented by Winning In Academy. Mark Moyer doing some great things with his networking events. Had a great job fair yesterday. We're going to be doing another networking event in the next couple of weeks. Check out winninginacademy.com. I'm Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today we welcome Jim McCarthy to this show. Jim, welcome to the Wolff Den. How's everything going?
It's going great, Matt. How are you?
I'm tired, but doing great. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
And for the people in the audience who don't know who you are, just give a quick introduction, and then we'll get into everything.
Well, I'm one of the founders of Goldstar. So if your audience buys tickets or sells tickets, as a venue or as a promoter, producer of shows, there's a good chance they've worked with us over the last couple of decades. Goldstar is a marketplace for people who, producers of live events, venues, producers, etc., and people who want to find something great to do. And so I'm one of the founders of Goldstar, and I'm one of the founders of Stellar, which is a company that Goldstar created during the pandemic and continues and is going to continue into the future, giving people a platform for their online and digital live entertainment events. And so I'm kind of doing both of those things right now. That's mostly what I'm up to.
That's not doesn't keep you too busy, right?
Not at all.
So Stellar, I mean, we're going to get into everything, but Stellar really is something that was born because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And live events were not happening. So you said, all right, what can we do? Stellar's there. But let's start from the beginning. How did you get into the event world, and how did Goldstar become a thing?
Goldstar became a thing because there were three of us who wanted to have a business that we ran and owned and could call the shots. Really, that's literally it. So the two co-founders and I, Rich Webster and Robert Graff, were friends. We worked at a company that we live in near downtown. We live in Pasadena, basically. People might not know the LA area, but we all had worked for the same company in Long Beach. So we commuted to Long Beach every day. And so we had sort of 45 minutes or an hour each way to talk about the stuff that we liked and didn't like. And one of the things that we thought was, one day we're going to find a way to do our own business, do it our way, and kind of so forth. And so about a year or two after that, we actually did. We started Goldstar with $1,000 and a real basic concept, which is that the internet is a perfect way to bring people who are buying tickets together with people who want to sell them tickets. The biggest problem, as almost everybody knows in the industry, is awareness, right? People don't know about the events that are going on. It's one of the biggest problems, right? I can ask people anywhere I go. I can ask people what's happening this weekend in your town, and most people can't name often they can't name one thing that's happening, but they certainly can't name five usually, and there's usually dozens. So Goldstar was really built to solve that problem. We did it really, like I said, literally with the three of us and a handful of friends that we sort of used the old Tom Sawyer paint the fence method of getting them to help us out, and just gradually grew the business over the years to be pretty substantial. We sold tens of millions of tickets to millions of shows, and obviously it's been a tough year and a half for Goldstar, but it's coming back. As live events come back, it's definitely on the way back.
So yeah, a few things I want to touch on there. The first one is, how long did it take you? It sounds like you said about a year or two from when you decided to say, hey, let's do this, to we actually did this with Goldstar. Because I find, and I'm guilty of it myself, I had so many good ideas for stuff like businesses, and then the second I had that first roadblock, I kind of just stopped. And that was partly because I was, back in the day, I was very lazy, and I was trying to give myself an excuse, and I didn't go through with it. And the best advice I can give to anyone who's thinking about doing it is the old Nike: just do it. I mean, just do it. You have an idea, just go after it and do it, and see what happens. And most people, they can't get out of their own way. They make the excuses. So I think you said it took you about a year or two to start.
Well, so we were started with idle chit chat about wanting to do a business someday, right? Like that's as good a place as any to start.
Right.
But I think from the time that we hit on the exact idea of Goldstar to the time that we actually started in earnest was really just a couple of months. We did some business planning and just some basic evaluation of the idea. Does it make sense if you turn a few of the rocks over, like, is there enough there to make a go of it? And then we kind of went for it, and we launched the site very quietly, built the site ourselves, so very quietly. It was before they used the term, but it was a sort of an MVP, a minimum viable product,
Right.
and it really gave us the opportunity to see if people cared at all about the concept, and they did. So that, I think that can be a smart way to do it. I mean, you don't want to. I mean, I agree with you that you have to bring your idea into action, but at the same time, it's smart to not, bet the farm on every idea you've got, right? Like, what can you do? What can you do to see how strong the idea is before you risk it? Risk your whole life, risk your career, risk your house, whatever. That I think is a good way to think about it. But action is key. But what I don't believe in, or what I wouldn't advocate to people, is polishing an idea forever, because it's not going to get that much better. Reality is going to be the best teacher as far as what you should actually.
It's probably going to get worse and better. Like, you'll hear some good things about it, like you can do this, but people are going to, and not to, not in a negative way. They're just going to tell you, hey, this is what's wrong with it.
Right.
That's great feedback.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's, that kind of feedback is kind of useful. I would say that asking your friends or whatever is only a little useful.
Yeah,
right?
I agree with that.
Because they're trying to help you. They're trying to prevent you from doing something disastrous. So their impulse is going to be to point out the things that are wrong with it. And there's no business concept. There's no theoretical business that isn't a terrible idea as well as being a good idea, right? Like, Scott Galloway, I don't know if you know Scott Galloway. He's a professor at NYU and an entrepreneur himself. He said that, his reaction to every business concept he's ever been pitched is, it makes perfect sense and it will never work.
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And I kind of feel like, yeah, that's both, that's kind of true. It was true of Google. It's true of everything, right? It's really just reality. And when you hit the streets, so to speak, when you hit the bricks with your concept, reality is going to tell you more in days than you could learn, with at some point, with months and months and months of research,
Right. And it's, for most of what we're doing and creating and putting out there, a survey, regardless of how professionally done and accurate it might be, is not like, I don't need a survey to tell you that what I'm doing is viable. Now, you need to have some data, right, and some feedback, but I don't have anything to say, hey, what we're doing is going to work, other than other people are doing it already. And the fact is, some of them are doing it very poorly. And in your world, there's plenty of people selling tickets very poorly, which is the good thing is they're selling tickets. There's another avenue for you to get tickets. The bad thing is they're doing it poorly. Some of them might have a lot of good pub, right, and coverage from the media and other people, but it's really not good. And people think, all right, well, this is what it should be. They don't understand that it could be much better.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think, I would just mention Google, and it occurred to me that for those of us who were around, as adults, and particularly people in the business, the internet business at the time, it did not feel like there was an opening in the search engine business at that time. It felt very, very conquered. And it's weird to say that now. But when they appeared in 90, I think it was 98, 97 might have been when they were first online, but they started to hit people's consciousness in 98. It felt like that game had been played and won, the search engine game. And it hadn't, because they came in and within a few years, they were absolutely dominant, So it's not just, this is the other thing about the idea when it comes to entrepreneurship. There's not that much. I mean, there's good ideas. There's terrible ideas, right? And there's good ideas, but the good ideas don't guarantee much. And the terrible ideas can be modified, right? So if you get an idea that's not that great and it goes out into the marketplace, and the marketplace kind of slaps you in the head and you change it, though, all of a sudden you've got a good idea, So that's, I think people kind of overestimate, the importance of the perfect, idea.
I think the biggest difference between a bad idea and a terrible idea is that the terrible idea costs you a lot of money to do, or you have to give up a lot of your idea to make it happen. That's how I would probably.
Actually, it's a really good point. Like, if it's structurally designed to be disastrous, because you'll never get it off the ground, or it's too the risk, the cost and the benefit are out of whack. Or it's a good point. Those stay away from.
Yeah, but then it's so hard because when you have an idea, you're so passionate about it. That's generally the only ideas you should go with. Otherwise, you're like, just invest in something, maybe become a franchisee or something, and you're so passionate about it. It's hard. It's really hard to get away from doing those things that, are going to be detrimental to you.
What's interesting is that there's a couple of different takes on that aspect of this. And I think they're both worth thinking about. The traditional take is, be careful if you're using yourself as a test market for something, because maybe you're weird, right? And you should try to learn what your actual market thinks about it, however you can. Interviews, surveys, maybe, but however you can, right? Try to learn. The other take on that I hear more and more, which is, look, build a product for yourself and make it something you absolutely love, and then assume that there's, or maybe not assume, but build it on the idea that you can count on the fact that there's a bunch of people like you. I think those are both worth thinking about. I don't know that one of them is correct in every circumstance and the other one's wrong.
Well, it's also, if I'm doing, like, for me, like in Ticket Time Machine, I'm a ticketing expert. I've been in the ticket business a long time. I'm an expert, and I can tell everyone why this is the right thing to do and why it's good, and feel confident that I'm heading in the right direction and telling people something that's true.
Yeah.
I also, one of the things, and I got plenty of bad things about me. We talk about it all the time. I could be selfish. I could be lazy. But one of the other things that I think that I'm very good at is being able to understand something, even though it's not for me, right?
Okay.
I never seen an episode of Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones, but I understand why people like it. And I've never smoked weed, but I understand why people like it. And the one thing lately that I can't wrap my head around is the NFT. I don't know how well versed you are in NFT. I just don't see the value in it from a collectible point of view, which is what it's intended to be, as opposed to something that's an investment, right? If you're thinking it's an investment, it's going to blow up. So I can't wrap my head around that, but it's a huge thing right now. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think one way to think about this is, what would happen to NFTs gosh, it's such a broad topic. Both of us are probably going to, kind of say dumb things if we keep talking about it for very long.
That's the best part about it.
Fair enough. I mean, I think, for some corners of the NFT world right now are pure speculation. And that's going to happen. I mean, it happens over and over and over again. What NFTs can do, obviously, is very powerful, right? I mean, there's lots of ways in which sort of authenticatable token can be used, but the idea that you're going to buy a picture of Michael Jordan or something and then get rich from that, I think it's just one of those things that comes along with new technologies. There's always some froth on the top, and then underneath that, though, I think there's some real value in the technology itself that's going to play out in a more obvious way to everybody over time. That's all. That's what I think. It's just,
we'll see what happens. Let's go back to Google for a second, because I use Google exclusively. I don't use anything else. I can't tell you. I really have no idea why I do it.
Yeah.
Like, something comes up and I couldn't even Yelp I don't know who has other, but I use Google and I can't tell you why. So what percentage of the customers are really educated in what they're doing, or even for themselves? Like, I'll tell you right now, I'm not an educated customer as to why I use Google, and it doesn't cost me anything, but I don't know why. So what percentage of people do really know why they do what they do?
Yeah.
And then, do you know why they do what they do? How do you find that out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the assumption that people do things for rational reasons is wrong. That I can tell you, right? The idea that I've really thought it through. I've weighed the pros and cons of something, and I've come to the conclusion that I should use Google. Nah, that's, it's really funny. Like, there are times when I see it in my own behavior. Like, I have this just like, oh, why am I doing this exact thing? I don't know. I mean, it's like a habit. You just wear a groove into life, so to speak. Yeah. And you're doing it. And I mean, obviously companies love it when they get a lot of people, feeling that way, because it's automatic money for them. I guess it's not the end of the world. I mean, the reason that we used Google when it first came out was it kicked the crap out of everything else. Like, it was just a big jump forward in terms of the quality of the search. And by the way, you may remember this. It was just search. There were no other features on Google. No email, no nothing. It was just a search bar in the search results.
I can tell you, I'm one of the few people who probably would have liked it to just stay that way, because when I had a business. When I left ticketing, I was doing some brokering, and I started a business, and I called it was Vandelay Consulting Inc. And
so even though you haven't seen Breaking Bad or you haven't seen Game of Thrones, you have seen Seinfeld. Clearly,
Seinfeld's my number one show of all time. I love it. So it's Vandelay Consulting. So I love Yahoo Mail. To me, Yahoo Mail is the standard. I had AOL, didn't like it. Tried Gmail. I hate Gmail. Okay. But I had my company thing. And so when I started a Google account, it was on that.
Right.
Now, I cannot change that. I cannot change. I can direct it elsewhere, but everything is from Vandelay, which I haven't done in 15 years. I can't change it. It's like, it's I don't even know why I can't do it. So, for me, Gmail, Google Mail, all that other stuff, I don't use any of it. Who knows why? I think, and then the other point I want to make is, I'm dealing with a lot of bad experiences in buying. I'm trying to give people my money. They don't want to take it. I want to get your opinion on this. The reason why there's so many bad salespeople out there and bad companies out there is because of the bad consumer and customer. They've gone in either uneducated and just let the salespeople run roughshod over them, or they just are rewarding these people for bad behavior. And so, I talked to a car dealer who's like, wants me to come into the dealership. And I'm like, no, I'm not ever going into a dealership again to negotiate.
Right.
Just because you have people who go in there and they don't want to hassle and they'll pay you whatever.
Right.
That doesn't mean that other people who are educated about it could. So the uneducated consumer, the uneducated customer has really allowed for bad salespeople. I don't know what you think. What have you encountered out there?
I don't know where I would place the blame. I mean, obviously consumers have a certain amount of power, but companies have more, I think, in overall, that they could do better if they wanted to, but they don't. And I tend to side with the customer in these situations. If your example of the car companies is a great one, right? They absolutely, from probably 20 years ago, could have created a much more streamlined process for, negotiating and buying a car using the internet. And they didn't want to. And they didn't want to, in part because it was just like, oh God, really? But the second thing,
sorry to interrupt, but even the ones who are doing the Carvanas of the world, they're much higher priced than if you actually have a conversation and do it. So it's like, that's for the lazy person. To be like, hey, you don't want to hassle, you want to pay extra, that's great.
Yeah, and there's a place for that in the world, right? I mean, do you remember the car company Saturn?
Yeah.
They had a no haggle policy, so the price was the price. Like literally, the cars on the lot at Saturn were like items in a grocery store. You don't negotiate with the grocery store. You just like, here's the price, And they put that forward as a benefit to people, because a lot of people really dreaded that aspect of the car dealer experience. They didn't just well, it was like part of the reason they didn't want to go to a car dealership. Part of the reason they didn't want to even deal with buying a car was that interaction with a sort of semi-sleazy salesperson. And am I getting ripped off? And are they going to try to add something at the end? All of that was a source of dread. And so Saturn learned that and came up with this policy that did cost money. They figured it probably cost people about $1,000. But to people to have that clarity of like, I'm not going to have that kind of interaction that I dread. I mean, in a way, I think people were like, I'll pay it. I'll pay it. It's but the worst is when you get both, right? You have the terrible experience and you pay more, which is,
I mean, that's what we're living in. But people are lazy. There's so many examples of this. I tell my wife every time we're like hosting people, like, why did you buy a vegetable platter? Why did you pay 10 times the amount of money when I could have just made a platter in about 5 minutes? Right. Buy the carrots, I'll chop them up. Yeah. But people like to do it. If you're in a rush, it's good. But
Yeah,
people
yeah.
don't really do it when they're not in a rush. So anyway,
Yeah. Well, people trade off time and money, right? I mean, people trade off hassle, and it's an interesting phenomenon. I mean, I think on some level they say that if you want to maximize the value of your money as it relates to making yourself happy, buy your time, right? Like use your money to get your time back. So you can kind of understand, why someone would do that. And
it just depends. I think the money to the time in that it's not there. When I worked for LexisNexis, they allowed me to buy vacation time, and I would buy as the maximum they allow me to. And it was, I think, maybe 5 days. Just take that spread over 26 pay periods. It's nothing. And when you're in sales, you don't even know what you're making anyway on a monthly. Right. So I couldn't even tell you what it cost me or what it was. I would have bought 10 more days if they would have allowed me. Right, I'm actually going to post something today about time and how people, like, your time is not as valuable as you think it is, but your time is also more valuable than you think it is. Oh, yeah. And I think they're both true. Some people just value their time it's so deflated. At the end of the day, my time is more valuable than anyone else's in this world, and everybody should feel that way. Now, how you choose to give it is a different story, whether it's more valuable or not. Well, let's talk about Goldstar.
Sure.
I'm going to tell you my opinion and my experience on it. And I want you to tell me how close to reality that is and maybe what people should know about it. Okay. So for me, if I look at Goldstar, it kind of is in the Groupon-ish world a little bit. And then I've only bought Goldstar for events that were like community theater, like local theater, smaller type events. So sporting events, big concerts. I never bought on Goldstar, probably because I knew about those things, right? And it's what you said, like, this is for the stuff that people don't know. There's so many events going on I live in South Florida, so that's probably one of the more busy markets that you deal in. But what is that? How far off am I? Am I close?
You're in the business, right? So you tend to know about a lot more than most people, but I still bet there's a lot of stuff going on that you're not aware of. I mean, I think that's the best thing about Goldstar. For me, it's one thing, and we do this too. It's one thing to save you money on a show or to give you availability that you might not have had to a show that you knew about and you like. Yeah. And that's a valuable part of Goldstar. People certainly check Goldstar first to see if stuff they're interested in is there. And that makes sense because we have a good buying experience and great customer service and all that kind of stuff. But the best thing is above and beyond, you helped me get a ticket that I wanted, which is good. A great thing is you made me aware of something I had no idea existed, and I love it. Yeah. And that's something that's just, for me, that's something that is so valuable, because any one of those experiences can be just really enriching or life-changing. I mean, I've been to things that through Goldstar, frankly, and not just through Goldstar, but through Goldstar too, that have just blown me away, and they've actually become part of my life in some way. Either it opened my mind to some kind of music, or it just a show that just I came to love or whatever. And I think that's why people who go out to live entertainment go out, is that it's not just that it's fun, it's also that it kind of expands you, and it kind of gives you more.
I took my wife to see The Wedding Singer local production, and
okay,
it was one of the corniest, and the acting was, I don't want to use the word terrible. It was not, it wasn't good. It was good because I admire anyone who can get up on stage and do that. Sure. They don't need to sit behind a camera and have 15 takes. I think it's incredible. It was really corny. We had a great time. It was great. We probably should go to more of these. And I found that on Goldstar. But the other thing that I find is when I scroll through the Goldstar email, which I'm subscribing, I would suggest everyone go to goldstar.com and enter in your zip code and subscribe so you can get an email and it'll tell you everything that's going on. I forget. Can you control how often you get it? Daily, weekly?
Yeah. You can limit them. Yeah.
The one thing that I don't know, and maybe I got to go back in because it's been a while, is I kind of get so many things that I'm like, I'm never going to be interested in any of these. Is there a way to filter into sort of what I might be interested? Because there's a lot of local, where I'm at, there's a ton of local events. I might have to scroll through 50 of them and never.
Yeah. So we use a thing that we call Matchmaker that we built. which is a kind of ranking algorithm. I gotta tell you, it is acting a little weird right now because it's coming out of the pandemic. So normally there's just a ton of data flowing through the system of events. So it's still kind of coming back up to speed. So there could be some recommendations that Matchmaker's spitting out these days that are a little weird, but as things get back to their normal level, it should get better. But we use Matchmaker to put the events in front of you that we think, it's not always correct, but that we think are going to be right for you. But then we also have an email once a week that sends you almost everything in your area.
Yeah.
So that's going to include a lot of stuff.
That's what I go through. I actually rarely ever go to Goldstar. I just rely on the emails that I get. So I probably have to switch my my information on there.
You can switch it up. We've had over the years because we send on once a week, we send this big compendium email, and we've asked people over the years, do you want us to limit it? And they all, not everybody, but the majority of people say no, because I don't want to miss anything. I want that sort of thing.
That's a good point, but I'm telling you, I scroll through those emails all the time, and it's like it takes me a long time. I'm like, scroll. When am I going to find?
People here's what I've learned, Matt. Men tend to want to save time in that process, and this is just a general tendency. Women tend to actually enjoy that process of going through it. We see, obviously, that's a very broad generalization, but when we ask women the question, like, do you want us to cut it down? The numbers are very strong. They say no. Some men say like, well, just give me the stuff I need. And so it's a little bit of a different take. So I don't know.
You have to know what they need, but I'm in the weeds of 10 different newsletters I get, and I got to scroll, industry newsletters, like, all of this. You're probably getting the same ones. And I'm like, oh my God, I operate generally in a clean inbox, but I was away for a week, so I didn't get the chance. So I have like 50 emails that are, I don't know which ones you get, but the future party and hashtag sports and X Live. And so I'm subscribed to all these things that I want to see what's the latest and greatest.
Right.
A lot of them kind of have the same ones over and over again. It's just
right.
I'll be very happy when I have an assistant who could scroll through them and say, hey, take a look at this article.
This is the one you need. Yeah, no, it's very important. We all want that. We all want the exact information that we want. It's hard to get there.
Well, let's go back. You talked about, you were working with some friends and you decided, but how did you get a love for events? Like when you were growing up, and when did it start? What were your favorite, what did you gravitate towards at the beginning? I know you're a big music guy, obviously.
Yeah, I'm a music guy. I would not describe myself as like an event fanatic before I started Goldstar. I always would go to concerts and theater and just anything, right? I remember being 5 and going to a Disney, stage show in the Little Rock amphitheater or whatever it was called when I was 5 years old, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I mean, I remember the kind of feeling being a little kid and going like, oh, this is a magical thing that's happening in front of me. You know what I mean? Which is the same feeling, I think, today, right? Like before the show starts or before the curtain goes up or whatever. It's the same feeling. But I would say I'm kind of like the sort of test patient for Goldstar, because I built habits of going to concerts, going to more theater, going to stuff because of Goldstar. I mean, like I fully dove into the industry, got to know everybody and got to know everything that was going on. And I'm like, I got to go to this. I got to go to this. So it really did over the time of running Goldstar. It really did help me get into that habit of just going out to live entertainment. A lot. And now it's obviously been it's been a big change over the last year and a half. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so you start Goldstar, things are running great. You're doing great. You're selling millions and millions of tickets. And then the pandemic happens.
Yeah.
And you think, what? How does your life change in the first, I got married on Leap Day of last year. We came back from honeymoon and we were right in the pandemic.
Right.
I was a month away from going all in on Ticket Time Machine and leaving my full-time job, which I needed to do. Timing was great for me. But what happens, once the pandemic hits and you realize these events start getting canceled?
Yeah. We started to track the number of people asking about COVID, as it related to their tickets in February. We started doing a thing where customer service would just, if someone said, hey, what happens if my show's canceled, et cetera, And for a few weeks there wasn't too much. It was just, maybe a couple a week. And then it kind of like bubbled up to the next level and then, at some point I could see where it was going. And I was just like, oh, okay, I get. So we were kind of braced for impact, but didn't make any, didn't help enough. Right. Like it's like if you're on a train track and the train's coming, but you're, stuck on the track, it doesn't really help much to know that the train's coming.
Yeah.
So we were prepared to kind of move fast and, change the cost structure of the business, which meant that we did, fortunately, only a small number of layoffs, but we did a lot of partial furloughs and salary reductions for management and salary reductions to zero for me for a while and stuff like that. Really just within the mindset that we're gonna find a way to add value during this and get through it.
But you were like you weren't small, but small, not a huge corporation where you could be a little bit more flexible and it's easier for you to maneuver a little bit.
Oh, I mean, we had 120 people or so at the time. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, obviously, compared to Live Nation or anything like that, it's not on the same scale, but it's enough people to where it felt like a lot of people.
If you had to lay off one person or reduce salary, that's enough. I know I don't have any yet, but I know as an owner, it's enough to make you sick, right?
Yeah, and people who it's just very different. I mean, I think our segment, live entertainment, is harder hit maybe than any segment by the pandemic. I mean, people talked a lot about how hard it hit the restaurant business was, but I felt like, there's a lot they could still do that did not change. And for live entertainment, that really wasn't true. I mean, we went into the online space in part because it's an emerging technology anyway, and suddenly people had nothing to do but that. So,
it was happening before. We had Jared Reddick on the Wolff Den. He's been doing staged shows for years and years.
Yeah.
And Evan Lowenstein, they were, they've been doing shows well before.
Right.
Now the technology's kind of gotten better.
Yeah.
The things that your advantage is you guys don't hold any inventory, right? So you weren't hit by the refunds and all that, but your customers were having to deal with that with the people that you kind of pass along to. So how did that affect things?
It was something that we worked on every day for about 2 months, just taking care of everything that we could. It was, I mean, every day of the first few months of the pandemic was just a delicate dance of everything, trying to figure out what to do next, trying to figure out how to get through the refund thing, just the cancellation process. There were a lot of shows that just had to be canceled. I mean, that work took weeks. Every day was, a sort of bunch of compromises and discussions and, a little bit here and a little less there and a little, just that whole thing of taking care of people, but, making sure the company would survive. I mean, it was a very, very, I mean, it's still a challenging time because the business isn't fully back yet, but that was a dramatic time that I did not ever think we would be going through something like that. But we did.
You did. You transitioned fairly well into the streaming world. Had some big events, right? You had some big names play.
Yeah.
What were some of your favorites? Who were some of the? Was Weezer? Did you guys do the Weezer show?
We didn't do Weezer. We had one of the biggest shows have actually been in the theater space. We had a Jagged Little Pill, the Broadway show Jagged Little Pill did about 20,000 people. It was the first thing that was live, in Broadway since the pandemic, the first sort of big show that happened live. And, in addition to that, I mean, there's been a Rock of Ages concert in April. We had a new show that hopefully will be on Broadway in about a year in May. And we've had lots and lots of small theater events, lots and lots of small concerts, lots and lots of clubs. I mean, there's still, at any given time, there's 50 things going on. Rush is debuting this is very cool, actually. Rush is debuting a concert video on Stellar in about a week and a half. And so there's just a lot of good stuff. I mean, it's been fun. I agree with you. Like, this has been happening for a long time. we took a leap forward in not only the quality of the tools. I think Stellar sets a new standard for what you should expect your online video platform to do, but also the number of people who've got some experience now in figuring out how online and digital live can totally transform their business. You know what I mean? Like it's you know, being in the live business, we know what the limitations are. The limitations are if you sell out, your P&L ends, right? Like that's you closing the door on more profit. But with an online, you know, component to it, you can go right through that and go to infinity essentially.
Well, a few things there. I've never seen Jagged Little Pill. I'd love to see it. I did see Alanis live in concert.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago. She was fantastic. That was my first time seeing her. But I think one of the things that you that was smart about what you're doing is the Broadway the shows, because in a year and a half, I can count on one hand the number of concerts that were streamed that I would pay money for, because there's a lot of reasons why. We can delve into it.
Yeah.
But a Broadway show, there's just, if the quality of your technology is good, then the experience is going to be good. With a live concert, you got to talk. First of all, these people don't want to sing; they want to lip sync, right? Because it's going to sound better. Or they want to do something that's pre-recorded.
Yeah.
Then it's like I can just go to YouTube and watch your video. Why do I need to pay for a stream? And then nothing really exclusive about why do I need to watch this now? It's the same reason why I DVR stuff and I can go to Netflix and watch stuff that came out 10 years ago. So there's a lot of factors as to what you want out of an event when you're talking about live streaming. I think you guys hit, a bunch of those.
Yeah, I think that live experience part of it's really important. I've heard a lot of musicians, even big ones with big fan bases, talk themselves out of doing an actual live show and to do something a little more canned. And I always say, like, don't be afraid of doing the show live. In fact, you got to go further than that, and you got to make it something that's, that needs to be live. Right? You can't miss it. This is the thing that if you start to think like if you start to think like somebody who's producing something that needs to be seen live, as opposed to sticking a camera or two in front of a concert, you can start to come up with reasons why you would want to see it live, right?
Yeah.
If there's something you don't know, if there's something that's going to happen, and it could be this or it could be that, you might want to see it, right? If there's interaction between you, one of the things that was amazing with every event, but certainly with the Jagged Little Pill show that we talked about, people came into the lobby of the stream lobby, as we call it, an hour before the show started, and there was some content, that ran for the hour, some good content. But the main thing that people came into the lobby and did was they chatted with each other. Like, it was crazy for the
best thing about the pandemic.
And then after the show, even more amazing, show ends, right? Thank you, good night, graphic, just a graphic up on the screen. People stayed in that chat. I think there were 1,000 people in that chat 45 minutes after the show was over.
I tell you, I when the pandemic first started happening, I was going on every single webinar that was out there. And when I would go on a webinar and they didn't have a chat feature, I would click the exit button. I'm like, I could find this content anywhere. What I can't find is all the other people asking the questions, making the comments. And they're comments that these people aren't going to put on screen because they're not flattering. But those are that's the real comment, the real interaction that you're going to want to have. And people are so afraid of all the bad stuff. But that's really, bringing the bad stuff to light, and what the customer wants and the fan wants is really, that's what's going to help you give a much better product.
Well, if you take that and turn it in, I agree with you there. But the other positive side of that is that if you have a fan base that you bring together in a live event online, you're doing two things that you can't do with an in-person. Because here's the truth, right? If you go to an in-person show, yes, you are there physically with other people, of course. But do you really interact with them? It's not really, right? Very few and very lightly, right? What we observe with online events is that if people are, at a show, if they're watching a show, and they're part of a fan base of a musician or a show, whatever it is, it's a love fest, man. I mean, they're enjoying each other's company in a way that you don't do in person, and it builds a bridge. So if I were, an artist with a fan base, the way that I would think about an online show is I get the best of both worlds. I can create this peak experience that brings people together, and in a live event, and I don't have to do it, in one locality. I can have a worldwide meeting of all the people who love me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how can that be a bad thing, right? Like, that's going to be good for artists to be able to bring together. Yeah.
My guy JD Iker has a Patreon, and part of his Patreon is he does a show called JD TV on every Monday, and it's like an hour and a half of live singing. He'll tell stories, but the community in the chat, and even if you go, I was at one of Jarrett Reddick's shows for Bowling for Soup on stage. The community in there is just it's a real community.
Yes.
And so as you're going to these events over and over again, you start to realize, there's a lot of value to this. Are they going to geolocate to be like you can only watch this live event? Because there's got to be you got to figure out how to you don't want to just make every show available to everyone. You're not going to, I don't think that's the right way, is it?
I mean, I think people worry too much about the wrong things. So I'll take a couple of them, for example. And I've given this feedback to some big artists, and mostly they've ignored me. They will eventually understand what I'm about to say. When you worry about polishing the last little brass bed knob or whatever on your show, and forget that you're not delivering a live experience that really touches the heart of your fan, you've missed the point, right? You're doing a movie. No one wants a movie. This is your point, right? No one really wants a movie from Weezer. Sorry. Right. You know what I mean? Or if they do, they can watch it whenever. Do they want access to Weezer? Do they want to be part of their community? Yeah, they do. So having every last little thing polished and perfect and smooth and that's not the important part. And so it's similarly, the geofencing. Worry less about that and worry more about delivering something that is worth limiting, if that's your point, right? Like, I think geofencing is generally a bad idea. I think you can be smart about how you provide content, and when, and if you're doing a tour, for example, how many times do you do a hybrid version of it? You can think about that. But this whole thing, I mean, it reminds me of the NFL's very outdated blackout.
Yeah.
I mean, you're aware of the saga of NFL blackout rules?
I mean, the local station that buys all the tickets so it doesn't get blacked out.
Yeah. It's one of the dumbest things that anyone's ever done. I mean, like, and they basically put it aside for the last, each year they decide to temporarily suspend it because they finally realize it's the dumbest thing they ever did.
Yeah. Well, the other thing on the geofencing is when you're doing something that's streaming, and you want to have some type of exclusivity or scarcity, because they don't want to be like, oh, well, I missed today's, I'll go tomorrow, or I'll go next week, and then they miss next week due to no fault of their own, just shit happens, and then they miss it. So you kind of want to get them when you can get them and say, hey, or even as you see, and you might have better idea on this, but the amount of people that buy a ticket to a show virtually last minute in the last couple is a tremendous number, right? And people aren't buying for 3 weeks.
People tend to think that's a little higher than it is, but yeah, the last day sales are higher for online, obviously, than in person. I mean, the way I look at it is like, if you're a musician and you're doing a tour, I would strategically do probably 3 shows online. I would do one early in the run, because not only are you harvesting you can get every promoter on the tour to market it. You can cross-sell the in-person tickets with the online tickets.
Right.
I would do it somewhere in the middle of the run at the most picturesque venue you're going to hit, right? So if you're playing Red Rocks, you should do it there if you can. That's just an example. And then I would do it at the end, or toward the end, right? In a bit, something like that, because it allows you to sell the same thing over and over and over again, right? Like, that's really the thing. Because I mean, how many, whether you're talking about Fish or the Dead or so many other bands where people want, it's not like, oh, I've seen it, I don't need to see it anymore.
No, they can't get enough of it. They can't get enough of it.
And artists have to embrace the idea that, like, if I have real fans and I do something different for them, they'll want to see it again. And so I think that's the creativity that has to come into play. Like, how do I give them something they want to see again? If you're talking about people, being lazy, and I'm not accusing anybody of being lazy, but there's a certain amount of effort that goes into figuring out why the show, should be live, right? Like, what's different about it, right? Like, if you're on a tour and you have 3 dates that are going to be, hybrid dates, what's different in those 3 dates? Maybe there's guest musicians that appear. Maybe there's, one of the things that, again, the Jagged team did was in the middle of the show, they said, look, our encore is going to be this or this. Which one do you want? And people voted and they picked the encore. So, you could theoretically have take that to the next level and have the content sort of driven by the audience in some way. So therefore it's just different every time.
A part of this question will be, we don't need to name specifics, but what I find is people want to do it the way they want to do it, and they're not going to listen to me, who's the expert, or you, who's the expert. What percentage of people are not listening to the stuff that you're telling them, and they're saying, well, we're going to do it this way?
I think that here's what I believe is happening. I would say the people who get this medium are going to set the rules over the next few years of what hybrid really means and how people can build audience and make a ton of money in it.
Right.
And then everybody who's not paying attention, or they're basically trying to just do the minimum and replicate what they do in the in-person world, eventually they'll be following the rules that the innovators are creating now over the next couple of years.
That's the biggest thing that annoys me, is that people do the minimum that they need to do so they can say they did it.
Yeah.
And they don't care.
Well, they will. I think they will once they see what the opportunities they're missing. And I think that's going to happen over the next couple of years, because the people who are innovating in this area realize they can make unlimited revenue and build a worldwide audience instead of being limited in the way that live performance is limited. So it kind of like, in the old days, it was a lot easier for a musician, for example, to have a worldwide audience, because primarily what you're doing is selling records or CDs or whatever, right? That got a lot harder over the last 20 years, because touring. Now this really kind of opens it up again in a different way, right? This really opens up those old possibilities in a different way. Theaters never really had those opportunities. So for theater, this is a whole new, world of opportunity. And I think people are going to figure it out. They need the innovators that are working now to tell them what the rules are. And if they think they are innovators, then they should jump in, right? Like if they want to be part of that, then now's the time to jump in.
I think theater is going to be a huge market for the live stream, because you look at the success of Hamilton, and that wasn't live.
That wasn't live.
Recorded. But it's hard for me to get to the theater, and maybe you don't want to get dressed up, and maybe, you're not going to have a good
seat. You don't have to get dressed up. You can go in just like that.
I know, but I'm saying if you're not in the first, I was in the first row for Hamilton. But I've been in theater where you've been further back, and you're like, what do you say? What do you say?
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I think theater is going to be a big. I think theater is going to be a big thing, and it sounds like you guys have a good position there.
Yeah.
Who do you admire in the entertainment world?
Who do I in our business?
Yeah.
You mean? Gosh, so many. I mean, I really admire people who. I mean, I admire. I admire the Cirque du Soleil people a lot. Guy Laliberté, who's the creator of Circus, is one of the most interesting people to me. He's not involved on a day-to-day basis very much anymore, but I just like the idea that the guy took the idea of being a clown and turned it into a multi-billion-dollar thing. That it's just amazing, right?
I've never seen Cirque, but I saw Absinthe, which was my favorite show, and it's kind of like a mix of Cirque.
I've seen Absinthe too. Yeah, it's good. It wouldn't exist if Cirque didn't exist, right?
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. It's kind of like it's a mix of that, but it kind of makes you remind of that.
Yeah.
Do you have a bucket list that you haven't been, either a venue or an event that you haven't? And then give me, it doesn't have to be your favorite event ever, but give me something in like your top 5 that just stands out, that comes to you like that.
Okay. Oh gosh. Anytime anyone asks me to say something immediately, I immediately can't think of anything at all. My mind goes completely blank. All right. Give me a second. Gosh. I saw REM in 1986 at the Columbia Township Auditorium, which holds, I think, like 1,000 people. We were huge fans of REM because we were like the hip, South Carolina, Georgia kids. Yeah. Nobody knew who they were. We walked up the night of the show to the box office, bought a $15 mosh pit ticket, walked right to the front of the stage, and we're 5 feet away from Michael Stipe and the band, and it was I was 16 or whatever, but it's a kind of experience where you're like, that was so cool. So that's something that I think, especially at that age, it just made me realize how cool live music really was, and really seeing a band that I admired from afar through the records and the radio and whatever, doing their art right in front of me, and just that was amazing. So that was an early one, where I think the experience was really special. I've been there's one I talk about that happened in LA about 15 years ago. It was a kind of immersive theater, and it was a show called Alma, and they did this show in this old movie theater called the Los Angeles Theater. I don't even know what the status of that theater is today. It was one of these amazing old movie palaces from like the 20s and 30s. It had balconies and just unbelievably ornate, but also falling into disrepair. But this was the thing. The show was basically about Alma Mahler, who was the wife of like 3 famous men, including the composer Mahler. And you could basically walk anywhere in this whole tumble down venue, and the show was happening all around you.
Oh, wow.
You could go anywhere. And then at some point, everybody comes back into the main auditorium, and you're in a funeral. And then the funeral goes and turns into the funeral dinner. And so we ate dinner, and then the show breaks up again. So this thing went on for like 3 hours. At one point, I got onto a school bus, really for real. And the school bus starts up and drives around the neighborhood and comes back to the theater. That was one of the, like, I went like 3 or 4 times because I just had
to around anymore.
I don't know. I wish it was. It was so amazing.
That sounds like a hell of an experience.
It was amazing. Like there was, there were points where like you're walking through areas, and all of a sudden they're like, run. You hear like bombs are falling, and everyone takes off running. So maybe that's too dangerous to do.
I gotta look at that. It sounds great. But how about like something you haven't been to? Have you been to the West End? Have you seen a show in West End?
Yes, I've seen a show in the West End. I haven't. Somebody just talked about Red Rocks. I've never been to a show at the Red Rocks. I'd love to do that. Obviously,
that's on my list too. All right, so we got a bucket list for there.
Yeah,
I know you're a whiskey guy. I am not a whiskey guy. Although somebody introduced me to Screwball, the peanut butter whiskey. You probably laughed at it because you're a whiskey guy. It's like the most delicious thing I've ever had. Had it at my wedding. Everyone was drinking it. But I'm not a whiskey guy.
Well, I'll tell you, here's where I am a whiskey guy, and I've learned a lot about whiskey. But my main thing that I always say is drink what you like.
Yeah,
drink what you like.
What do you recommend for someone who's not a whiskey person who wants to try and say, maybe I'm not drinking the right whiskey?
Well, there's a lot of great whiskey, and so if I were to just kind of throw one out there for you, knowing that you like Screwball, I would never recommend a flavored whiskey, but that's on you. I would say go get yourself a bottle of Old Forester 1910. It's a bourbon, right? So bourbon's a kind of bourbon is great. It's great. I love bourbon. I've spent a lot of time in Kentucky, in distilleries, talking to distillers and stuff like that. But Old Forester is an amazing bourbon. There's a lot of amazing bourbons with Old Forester 1910. It's a real nice middle of the road sort of delicious bourbon. Sip it slow, enjoy it. Don't guzzle it.
I can't enjoy that stuff. Have you tried Screwball?
I have not tried Screwball.
So it's just one of those things. Like, I'm a whiskey guy. I can't imagine that it's like a vodka guy. I love flavored vodka, but there are vodka people who would be like, I'm never going to drink a flavor.
Well, vodka doesn't really have much in the way of flavor, but whiskey goes to a lot of trouble of having flavor. So, I don't look down my nose at whatever anybody likes.
I get it.
Look, you drink what you like. Actually, that's something
you and I are going to sip on some. We're going to sip on some when we get together at some point. Yes. We're going to sip on some Screwball, and then I'll try whatever it is that you want.
I will when we get together, if you want to drink Screwball, I will drink some Screwball with you. I'm not.
My friend buys this syrup for his bourbon that it's like on sale once a year. You probably know what I'm talking about. I'll have to get you the name of it. But he buys like 6 bottles of it. It's just so hard to get, and it uses it for his old fashions.
Bitters, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to get you the name of it.
For me, whiskey's perfect the way it is usually. So
yeah, I get it. I mean, I understand that. I don't like the taste of it, and even like the gin, and so I'm a mixed drink kind of guy.
Yeah.
You're not mixing whiskey with anything really, and gin. You're generally drinking that straight because it's it's the quality of that liquor that you like.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So drowning if you're mixing vodka with anything, it doesn't matter what vodka you're using, right?
Yeah, but vodka's pretty much a neutral taste. It's on purpose. It tries to be as neutral.
And there's 4 billion brands of vodka out there.
Yeah.
Who knows what's better? That's why, for me, if I get a flavored one that I like, that's what I stick with.
Yeah, sure.
Give me
as I heard from one of the most famous distillers in Scotland, drink what you like, laddie.
I think everyone should drink what they like. No shame in anyone. Everyone's got their thing. Give me, this is going to be really broad, but I always like to ask someone about a Mount Rushmore. Give me your Mount Rushmore in entertainment. It could be the 4 best bands. It could be a combination of everything, a show.
Okay, of live entertainment or just in general?
Just anything, I guess. Whatever. We're short on time here, so whatever you can throw out quick.
Right. Yes. Okay. Let's see. Let's go. Can the Beatles be one head?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that original to like the Beatles, but that part of the reason is they're just so good, right?
Isn't it crazy that the Beatles could be on the Mount Rushmore and then all of the Beatles could be Mount Rushmore?
They could, yeah.
Right? I mean, you wouldn't call anyone crazy for that.
When George Harrison's your third guy, you're doing pretty well, basically. Okay, the Beatles in the world of today's theater, Lin-Manuel Miranda has to be up there.
Yeah.
I'm just looking forward to what else he has to say to us over the decades to come.
He was great on Curb, by the way. Very funny.
Yeah. Let's see. Gosh, this is tough, man. I didn't know I was going to have to do this. Let's see. Other fields. I think Donald Glover is another guy whose work I just can't wait. I can't wait to see what else he does.
My guest the other day was just talking about he's an actor.
He's everything.
But isn't that what he's known for being an actor?
Well, he's also known for being a musician and a writer.
Right, I get that. But if you ask people who Donald Glover is, won't they tell you he's an actor before a musician or a rapper?
I think it depends on who you ask.
Yeah, okay.
I think it depends on who you ask.
One more.
And then I would say, gosh, we've conspicuously left out women so far. Well, I'm going to put my friend Eva Price on that list because she's a Broadway producer who I think is going to innovate for many years to come. I'll have to send her this so she.
All right, we'll tag her when we share it. Two quick questions. What would you be doing if you weren't in entertainment?
Something in technology, surely.
Technology. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the internet business since '97, so I think I would have probably continued, with that in some way or another. And
we'll let you out of here on the same question we ask everybody. You have one person you could spend a day with. It could be anyone in the world. They have to be alive. You can't be related to them or have hung out with them before.
Right. Okay.
Do some outreach to make it happen. Who is it? What are you guys doing?
That's a great question. Well, you know what? I think I'd like to hang out with Donald Glover. Now that I'm thinking about Donald Glover, I think that Donald Glover. We could just all we'd have to do really is probably just drink some non-peanut butter whiskey, and talk about music and
Jim,
TV.
what's going to happen when you sit down with Donald Glover and he tells you that he loves peanut butter whiskey? You're going to have like a whole.
I'm going to say, drink what you like, laddie.
All right. Well, he's on the list. We make a list. We're doing some outreach to make it happen. Really appreciate your time here. Love what you're doing with Stellar. I'm going to go back into Goldstar and kind of switch up my shit. But everyone should go and sign up for it. It's just great. There's so many events that you've never heard of.
Especially now, the coming back in full force. So now's the time to sign back up for Goldstar.
All right. Check out.
If you want to figure out about online events, if you're an event producer, contact us. Either contact me or go to workwithstellar.com. Yeah, we can help you kind of get over the hump and get into that world and start reaping the benefits.
Goldstar.com, workwithstellar.com. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to everybody soon.
All right. Thanks, Matt.